I'm Paul Brereton. I'm Professor of Practice here at Queen's University Belfast. So I'm also Director of the Institute for Global Food Security here. And I suppose I'm the host for this event, which is the first civil society forum that's ever been on nature finance. So we organized this with the support of BIOFIN, who were instrumental in really making this happen. So we're grateful to John and the team for doing that. And we really didn't know when we wrote this proposal what sort of event it was going to be and whether anyone would be interested in it. But we wanted to make sure that civil society had a voice in how nature is financed. And a lot is going on in Europe and at high levels trying to facilitate or get finance into nature, both public and private. But the civil society hasn't really been involved. So we thought, let's have a meeting and get civil society and try and get them interacting with this and see what they thought and what their views were. So, like I said, we weren't sure if people were going to come to this event, but in fact, we had over 100 people registered, and we've had 2 packed days here at Queen's in Belfast, and lots of vibrant conversation, and lots of really good, meaningful thoughts and outputs that we're going to, put into BIOFIN reports, but also disseminate elsewhere. And we hope will be the springboard to other future events and some real initiatives so that the civil society voice is heard.
Hello, I'm Professor John Garvey. I'm Professor of Finance at the University of Limerick, and I lead BIOFIN, and we're here at Queen's University Belfast to really talk about finance and how to redirect mainstream finance for the protection and restoration of nature. I spoke earlier on this topic, and a survey that we've done in Northern Italy that tries to categorize or understand people's preferences for directing finance towards the protection and restoration of nature. It's been a fantastic event, and we've had a brilliant time networking with people from ecology, biology, data science, politics, and civic society. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nicola Ranger. I'm a professor in practice at the London School of Economics, and I study nature finance and the role of nature in building the resilience of our society. So I'm here in Belfast at the Civil Society Forum, part of the Integrating Finance and Biodiversity Programme and the BIOFIN Programme, sharing our research and talking to civil society organisations and government about the work that we're doing, particularly around sort of how can we mobilise more investment in nature. So a lot of my work is with financial institutions and central banks, looking at the risks associated with nature loss, sort of using new sources of data from satellites, geospatial data, AI, to really understand what those risks are associated with nature loss, and also where our economy is damaging nature as well. So, for example, through pollution, through deforestation. We've been here in Belfast learning about some of the issues here, for example, around Lough Neagh and the algal blooms and the role of agriculture. But importantly then looking at the solution. So the other part of my work is saying, well, what is the nature finance architecture for the UK and across Europe? Where are the gaps in that? And how can we promote more policies to bring more investment into nature, both to reduce some of the harms, but also to support, for example, farmers and businesses to be investing more in nature, and also getting financial institutions, so big investors, pension funds, banks, to be mobilising more investment into this area. Well, it's a pleasure to be back here again at Queen's University in Belfast. So it's actually my second visit here, working with our important partners that are part of the Integrating Finance and Biodiversity Programme and BIOFIN. And the forum is a really important space to bring together these different communities and to help us sort of reach out from the sort of finance and economics where I'm based to talk to other types of researchers as well. And it's been fantastic to hear from researchers from all across Europe, from Italy, from Portugal, to learn about the work that we're doing, the really impressive work, both looking at sort of particular solutions on the ground. So we've been hearing about different case studies, both within Europe but also internationally, for example, Brazil, looking at what's working and what we as researchers can do to provide the sort of data and tools and analytics to help mobilize more investment.
My name's Justine Evans and I'm a wildlife camerawoman, filmmaker, and I've been doing that for over 30 years now, working for the BBC and Disney, Nat Geo, lots of big production companies. And I'm also a resident of the River Wye area, and back in 2024 I became a claimant along with currently about 4,000 other people with their legal claim over the pollution to the river system. And so one thing has led to another, and I've now become the lead claimant for what has become the largest claim in UK history into environmental pollution. So I'm a client of Leigh Day. Leigh Day is a legal firm who are bringing this case to the High Court. So I live in a place called the Forest of Dean, very near to the River Wye, and back in 2024 I became a claimant for a very large lawsuit that's been brought to the High Court over pollution to the River Wye by a legal firm called Leigh Day. I have since become the lead claimant for this. So as a result, I have been asked to take part in this forum, which has been fascinating and a very big departure from what I normally do for a living, which is filming animals. But it's so nice to actually connect with people who care about the natural world in the way that I do, but are coming from different backgrounds, from academic backgrounds, from government backgrounds. So the importance, I think, is for us all to talk to each other, and also for communities to be supported to in their campaigns to protect their ecosystems. The River Wye campaign came about, or the lawsuit came about because the community campaigned against the pollution, and it's been seen as one of the most effective campaigns that's happened in the UK. The community, through charities like Friends of the Wye and River Action, have been passionate about preventing any further degradation of the River Wye and Usk. And this has led to this huge legal case, the biggest in UK history into environmental pollution. And so, you know, forums like this open up discussion and promote things like the rights of nature and personhood, nature being given personhood, a right to a voice through human guardians. And I think that is the future for our planet, that we readdress our relationship with the natural world, and we see it as having rights to be free from pollution and to work in the way that it should work, not in the way it works through a human lens.
So I'm Dr. Neil Reid here at Queen's University Belfast, and today I've been talking about the emerging ecological crisis at Lough Neagh in terms of water quality and blue-green algal blooms, and how we get investment into solving those problems, both through evaluating ecosystem services and natural capital, and then trying to attract private investment into solving some of these problems because of the large gap between public funding and conservation outcomes. We really need private investment as well. So it's really great to welcome people from all across Europe here in Belfast to this important first event, civil society forum, bringing people together to discuss how we get private investment into conservation biology.
Hello, my name is Francisco Silva Pinto from Lough Neagh University, and I participated today on the Civil Society Forum on Nature Finance. I shared with the audience the three Brazilian case studies where we were looking into three different programs with different scales of implementation that allow water tariffs to somehow feed investments in nature. The 3 Brazilian case studies, they allow to understand how different stakeholders can be put together to contribute in solving this issue of financing nature. Actually, the role of different stakeholders can be easily understood depending on the policy framework implemented and help in reaching better results.
Hello, I'm Tamara Spivey and I work at Newcastle University. I'm a research assistant in agricultural ecology, but I've recently started working more in the social science sphere and trying to understand different attitudes towards nature and how people feel about it. I'm working on the Integrating Finance and Biodiversity project, which we are presenting here at the Civil Society Forum at Queen's University Belfast. I have been running a Delphi study to look at civil society attitudes towards nature finance and what civil society feels the different barriers and facilitators are toward adopting nature finance and improving its uptake within civil society. It's been a really interesting couple of days of conversations, and I think we've really drilled into what the main themes are, and we need a focus on communication and education and awareness within the sector to better understand what we can do to help.
So my name is Dr. Nick White. I work for an organisation called Natural England. So we're government's advisors to the natural environment in England. I lead on Biodiversity Net Gain in Natural England. And my presentation was talking about how the policy developed, its implementation as a legal requirement in England, and how it can engage people, the opportunities for improving people's scope for engaging with nature, and how the approach can also be applied to other jurisdictions as well. We're already seeing interest in this globally, both in the policy and in the metric. And it's a real pleasure to be here in Belfast as well. It's a city I love.
Hi, I'm Professor Richard Field from the University of Nottingham in the UK. I'm part of the Integrating Finance and Biodiversity programme that is part of this event, which is also related to the BIOFIN project, of course. And here I had a few roles, but in particular I was giving a talk on the second day of the event about biodiversity credits. And I was really introducing what they are. I have a number of roles in developing biodiversity credits, which includes working with the Biodiversity Credit Alliance. That's a United Nations backed, somewhere between a community of practice and guidance giving body that's been developing a series of principles around biodiversity credits that are helping to establish this new market. And what are biodiversity credits? They are ways potentially of funding or channeling finance into biodiversity conservation, which they're not going to be useful for everything. So part of what I was talking about is what they're most useful for. And a key aspect of that is people wanting to develop biodiversity on their land, say do a project or a biodiversity enhancement, will often be limited in the amount of finance they have for the first part. So the setup and getting it going. And one of the main uses of biodiversity credits is to potentially fund that gap, that financing gap, before the project really gets going and generate some of the revenues that would be in the business case. And more generally, it's a way that's been put forward by the Global Biodiversity Framework and other major international and global agreements to try to channel more funding and finance into biodiversity through private investment. And we talked a little bit about some of the potential benefits, like I've just listed, but also some of the concerns, like, is it just going to be an excuse for governments to stop spending and saying, okay, the private sector can just pick up all that spending instead? And does it introduce any biases into the spend and into the biodiversity benefits that we have? So the aim was to start a conversation, and that is, of course, what this civil society forum is really all about. It's trying to engage people to get opinions from beyond those making the decisions and the academics studying the stuff, and try to get more input, thoughts, conversations and debates going amongst other interested parties and the wider public. And I think this is the first time it's happened on biodiversity finance, and I hope it's the first of many, because we need more of this.
My name is Christopher Brewster. I'm Professor of the Application of Emerging Technologies in Maastricht University. I'm part of the BIOFIN project. We lead at Maastricht the development of the software, the dashboard or platform for bringing conventional finance to invest into nature-based solutions. It's an interesting challenge because one has to be able to create a workflow that allows, on the one hand, people who create nature-based solutions to enter the kind of data, the kind of information that is needed to describe the nature-based solution, and then make that particular instance of a nature-based solution available for investment by conventional finance. So that means banks, insurance companies, and similar. And there are challenges here about identifying the kind of data that is relevant, collecting that data, because there's a great deal of variability as to what data is available in different countries and for different sectors. And our approach has been based largely on a microservices architecture, which allows us to plug and play different components. We have built an ontology to allow us to formally represent the information about each nature-based solution, and equally about the preferences of our specific users of the platform. We've also developed a component that provides information on the biodiversity risk of the investment, how precarious, if you like, the biodiversity in a particular area is. This allows a better choices to be made from an investment perspective. I'm here for the civil society event organized here in Belfast, and I've been presenting a little bit the platform and listening to the audience, giving feedback as to how appropriate this approach that we've developed in Maastricht is. It's a beautiful day to here, and it's a wonderful building, and it's been a very interesting event, bringing together different kinds of expertise. Thank you.
BIOFIN-EU,